All the DIYs in today's video have a similar woodland theme to them, and I use a lot of buffalo check in the projects as well. First up, I'm going to be showing you how to make this lantern really only using 2 larger items from the Dollar Tree. Also, I apologize for my voice in today's video. I am recovering from a little bit of a cold, so sorry if it sounds a little gross, but you know, the video must go on, and just like it is the time of the year for Christmas DIYs, it's also the time of the year for colds. But moving on, so first up, I am taking this, basically it's like a mason jar with a handle, and it's a mug from the glassware section, and I painted it entirely black. Then I took one of these larger, I think it's like a vase, but I called it more like a candle holder, and this fits perfectly down into our mason jar cup. This is going to be, of course, the top of our lantern, and I just stuck a tea light down inside of it. And to finish it all off and kind of tie it together, as well as hide some of the lip marks on the top of our mason jar, I took one of these buffalo check bows from the Dollar Tree. I did cut it down a little bit because it was a little bit too large, and then just adding some hot glue, I added it right into where the glass vase and our mason jar meet. I absolutely love this DIY. It's so quick and easy, but I think really looks like a fancy kind of woodland theme lantern that you could also leave up all season long. It doesn't just have to be for Christmas. I think it works really well into the winter months too. Per usual, the Dollar Tree came out with some great calendars for the upcoming new year, and I absolutely loved this image of the Christmas tree and the red truck from one of my calendars, so I knew that I had to put it in one of my DIYs this year. I picked up quite a few of these mason jar signs this past summer because I love using them in DIYs. I recently used it in a fall video. I'll pop up a picture of that. I think they are so great, so if you ever see them, definitely pick a couple up because they are great to use throughout the year. I did take off some of the more bulky fruit pieces because you know me, I gotta save everything. I'm sure I'll use it in a spring or summer DIY. And then I just flipped over my sign so I had more of that blank canvas to work with. I did paint the upper section of the mason jar using a dark green paint. I am going to be covering it in jute, but just in case there's any areas where some color does peek through, I wanted it to be that nice winter as well as a forest green. Then I took some buffalo check scrapbooking paper. I always pick mine up from Hobby Lobby. They're pretty much always on sale or running a deal with them. And I just adhered that down to my wood sign using a glue stick. This red truck image is from one of the calendars that you can pick up at the Dollar Tree, but if you're not able to find them, you can always go online, search red Christmas truck, and print it out before you adhere it down onto your sign. After I adhered the image down with a glue stick, I wrote out Merry Christmas using some bits of cardboard. This cardboard actually came with a calendar, so that's what I used. And I did use my cutting machine to cut out Merry Christmas. I also took a stain. I really like the antique stain by Waverly to stain all of my letters. With the cardboard, I did notice that the stain clung to some areas more than others, whereas I think if you used a basswood or a faux wood, or even the wood letters from the Dollar Tree, I think I would have liked it a little bit better because, yeah, I did notice that the stain clung a little bit oddly to some of the cardboard, but I would definitely recommend picking up some of those wood letters from the Dollar Tree. I think that really would have spelled out Merry Christmas even better, but I still love the way that this mason jar hanging sign came out, and I did add a little bit of embellishment in the top right using some greenery, ribbon, and a faux acorn. The Dollar Tree comes out with these wood house signs pretty much every year. I've definitely seen them for the last 2. I picked it up last year and never crafted with it, so I was very excited when I had an idea for what I wanted to make this year. I was able to go into my craft stash and use some supplies I already had. The first part of this DIY is giving it a bit of a farmhouse makeover. I did like the buffalo check, and I will bring some of those elements back into it. But first off, I wanted to lay down some of this kind of looks like a shiplap paper. Again, picked it up from Hobby Lobby. Absolutely love the value that you get for their scrapbooking paper. And I did realize that I forgot to kind of cut off the section where our little roof is going to be. So once I trimmed that down to size, I did use a spray adhesive. I really like this one from Elmer's. So I just sprayed down my area and then laid the scrapbooking paper on. And because it was a larger piece of scrapbooking paper, I used my scraper tool just to iron out any bubbles and make sure that my paper was laying nice and flat. I used a dark brown paint to cover up that buffalo check design on the chimney, and then I went in and of course had to make it farmhouse, dirty it up a little bit more by doing some dry brushing and using brown paint to distress the backing of our house. Next, I went in with some more details. So I wanted this to be kind of a cozy looking cabin, very woodland. So I picked up these smaller Christmas trees, which you can use for a Christmas village. And I am going to put that in the bottom right-hand corner. Then to add a little bit of the rustic touch, I took some jute and wound that 3 times around the top. So you can see that I was going for the black and white buffalo check kind of theming here, but I wasn't really liking it. I felt like I needed a pop of color. So I decided to go with red, and I chose a red and kind of beige buffalo check bow. And then here I am trying to decide what I'm gonna do for the paper, but I ended up choosing this one. It was 12 Days of Christmas sheet music, and it had that hint of red that I thought matched the bow really nicely. So I hot glued that down onto our sign, and then I followed up with some more jute on the bottom of our sign. Then I went ahead and once I was happy with my coloring choices, added the hot glue to make the bow a bit more permanent. And I did take a bell, which I used a little bit of brown paint to kind of add some faux rust. And I put that in the center of our bow before then hot gluing down the tree, now that I had finally decided what color and kind of scrapbooking paper to use. I picked up these ornaments. They came on a cardboard card with quite a few ornaments, and I wasn't sure if I wanted to use the buffalo check or the plain red, but I did end up going with the plain red Merry Christmas tag. I thought the other buffalo check was the wrong shade of red, so I added a little bit of jute because I had already cut off the ornament hanger, and once I added the jute, I hot glued that down into place, leaving a little bit of extra jute at the top. So it kind of looked like it was hanging off of our sheet music, which we already hot glued down. And then I went in and added a little bit more jute across the line of the sheet music. So it kind of looked like it was a really big package that was wrapped in some of this sheet music wrapping paper. The final touch was adding just a little jute bow onto where the hole was on my hanging ornament. I love how this turned out. I am definitely going to be displaying it on my mantle this year. I'm really excited to share how I decorate that with you guys in a future video. I have seen different styles of Christmas trees already out at Target, but they can be $10 to $15 a piece, so I wanted to make some more affordable options. Hope that you can notice my dog in the background. He is always so curious on what I'm crafting. Going to be making 3 different styles of trees, so I'm starting off with the smallest. I got these cones from Hobby Lobby. I got 6 in a pack, and I actually used them in a previous Christmas DIY. If you checked it out, I'll have it linked above. I turned these into ice cream waffle cones, but today I'm going to be using them as they were intended. They were sold as styrofoam trees, so I'm going to be transforming it into more of a decorative tree by taking some of this yarn. It's a little bit fluffier and softer than your typical yarn, and I did pick it up at the Dollar Tree. I wrapped the yarn all the way around my styrofoam tree cone and then just hot glued it off at the top. For an extra embellishment and to add a little bit more of a fun texture, this pom-pom ribbon came in red and white at the Dollar Tree, and I grabbed the white pom-poms and just wrapped that around my tree. Lastly, I finished off this smaller Christmas tree with a wooden star. I picked up a whole pack of these wooden stars from Hobby Lobby, and they have been going strong for 3 years now, so it was definitely worth the a little bit more of a price than $1. Next up, I'm taking one of these larger styrofoam cones that I picked up at the Dollar Tree. And unlike the Christmas tree cones from Hobby Lobby, it does have a little bit more of a blunt point. It's not quite as pointy as a Christmas tree, but I will fix that by hiding it with a star. Using that same white ribbon, I covered my cone completely. And as an embellishment, I grabbed this deer ornament from the Dollar Tree. I was going to hot glue it on to the cone, but then I realized the antlers fit perfectly to just kind of push that into the styrofoam, and then it stayed in place. So it was a great alternative to using hot glue. And again, to kind of hide that blunt point at the top of our styrofoam cone, I went ahead and stained one of the wood stars that I had and hot glued that to the top so it looked more of a point like a Christmas tree. The last of our Christmas tree trio is going to take a little bit more of a rustic touch. I grabbed the lid to a Pringles container, really any kind of food. I even think that you could use a mason jar lid because we are going to be covering this in some jute, so even if it's a metal, you won't really be able to see it. Then I took some bamboo skewers that I picked up in a huge pack from the Dollar Tree, and I'm going to be hot gluing 8 all the way around my Pringles can lid. Then at the top, I hot glued them all to a point so it would look more like a Christmas tree, and I did put down a rubber band just to hold everything in place while the hot glue dried. Next step is super easy. You're just going to be covering this entire bamboo skewer tree in jute. The only slightly difficult part was the skewers were a little slippery, so especially for the first go around, I did have to add down a lot of hot glue to just keep the jute in place. But then once I had that initial first layer of jute down, it was a lot easier to go in with more jute and add them all in between. And then I did also do them at some different angles to create a little bit more of a texture and something more appealing to the eye. So after I went all the way straight, kind of, basic around the tree, then I started wrapping them diagonally and in different patterns. With my jute in place, I took another one of my wooden stars and I did stain it with a darker brown paint, and then I hot glued that to the top of our tree. Now, I wanted to fill my tree with some lights, so I just took one of my X-Acto knives and cut a little hole in the bottom of our tree, which we are later going to fill with lights. To add some faux ornaments onto our tree, I took these super tiny beads. I remember they came in a pack from the Dollar Tree, and I was like, I'm never going to use these. But look, it really pays to kind of hold on to some things because these worked perfectly as a rustic looking ornament on our tree. The final touch was adding some of those twinkle lights up in the tree. You can't quite see it in the photos, but at night this did look really pretty, having this larger twinkling tree. That's why it's important to leave some holes in between the jute so you are able to see that light. I saw these wood skates for sale at the Dollar Tree and absolutely loved them, but wasn't sure what to do with them, so I decided to turn them into an ornament. The first thing that I knew I definitely wanted about these skates was for them to actually have laces. So the first thing I did before I went into any painting or decorating was drill some wood holes in them so that I would actually be able to lace them up. I drilled holes into every other loop section, and then once that was done, I went in with my paint to really bring these skates to life. For the actual blades of the skates, I wanted this to be rustic, so instead of going in with a silver metal blade material, I did go in with some stain. Then I grabbed some jute and actually laced through the laces and the holes that I had created. And once the skates were all laced up, it was time to turn them into an ornament. So I grabbed some more jute and just tied and knotted them at the top so that they would be able to hang off of my tree just like an ornament. Once I actually figured out how to correctly do this DIY, it was really fast and really easy. So you can learn from some of my mistakes, which I will show you in this next DIY, and show you how you can create your own custom candles using a napkin. So I picked up these candles. They came in a pack from the Dollar Tree, and this napkin is also from the Dollar Tree. It was a 2-ply, so I did pull it apart to make sure it was just one thin sheet. So I had read all over that you could use a hairdryer to do this, but as you can see, that absolutely did not work out for me. It was flying everywhere. I think a heat gun would work, but the hairdryer was just a fail for me. So I had also seen some women do this on Pinterest using their iron, so I just grabbed my little Cricut heat press and put it on the very lowest setting. I would recommend wrapping the tissue paper in parchment before putting down your iron or your heat press on this. I unfortunately was out of my parchment or butcher paper, so I did not do this. Nothing happened with my heat press. I think the only thing that might happen is you might get some of the wax from the candle on it, so do be careful of that. Again, really recommend the parchment paper. Do as I say, not as I do. But the napkin melted so beautifully onto this candle. It looked seamless. The white of the napkin pretty much evaporated into the candle, so all you see is the greenery and the holly berries. I absolutely love how these came out, and you could use any napkin pattern that you wanted and really create your own custom candles. I would be very careful if you're going to light these. I'm just doing these for decoration, and then I immediately blew them out afterwards. So if you do use these, please just be careful. I love decorating my mantle for the Christmas season and was trying to think, usually I'm doing tablescapes, but I kind of wanted to do something that you'd be able to place on your mantle and have a mantelscape. So this is a really easy DIY. I just used a lot of different items from the Dollar Tree and the Target dollar spot. First up, one of these wood signs that actually came out during the fall season, so it's probably still out in your Dollar Tree since it is still technically fall. It said "Gathered Together" on it, and I tried painting over it, but didn't like how that came out, so I ended up just using some wood scrapbooking paper from Hobby Lobby and placing that over it, and I just used a glue stick. It didn't feel like getting out the hot glue or the Mod Podge for this craft, so I'm just using my Dollar Tree glue stick to adhere the paper onto our sign. I love all the different wood ornaments, wood pieces, wood stickers the Dollar Tree comes out with, especially these snowflakes. They were on a sticker sheet, so I painted it powder blue and attached it with one of these glue dots. Then, using my cutting machine, I cut out the words "Hope" in a metallic silver vinyl, but I actually think it would look even better if you picked up the wood letters from the Crafter Square section of the Dollar Tree. It would give it a more rustic look. Next, I adhered this church ornament onto the center of our hope sign and then added Dollar Tree florals, trees, and some Dollar Trees from the Target dollar spot to complete our mantelscape. Wanted to include one of my favorite DIYs from a couple of years ago because I felt it really fit the theme of the video. I hope that you enjoy this church DIY. To begin creating our church, I am taking 2 of the arrow signs from the Dollar Tree. The smaller wood arrow I did cut in half, and then the larger wood arrow we're going to be leaving as is. And I'm taking the shade Territorial Beige by Apple Barrel, and I'm doing that to paint the larger wood arrow sign. And then on the smaller arrow that I have cut into 2 pieces, I took a dark brown shade, but I actually ended up not liking how the dark brown came out. I thought it was looking too much like a haunted house. It was just coming out really dark and not at all the snowy chapel that I wanted. So I ended up actually flipping the smaller arrow over. I did like how the larger arrow came out when I added the darker brown color. It really kind of created a fake wood. Well, it was wood, but you know what I mean. It came looking out a little bit more barnwood. And then for the smaller arrows, I just flipped them over and painted them in a lighter brown. And then I went in with white paint and dry brushed it to again make it look like that barnwood that I have seen so many people making churches out of barnwood and pallet wood. I don't know where they got that from, but I didn't have access to that. So these Dollar Tree arrows had to work for me.
and then I just hot glued the larger arrow on top of the two smaller ones, and you can see our church is starting to be created. For the cross that is going to be going at the top of the church, I took two toothpicks and I just snapped them in half to create our cross. And then I'm taking a silvery gray color, but I'm going to be covering this later in white paint to make it look nice and snowy. So really the color that you paint the cross doesn't really matter because we're going to be going over it with white paint. And then once this paint had dried, I added a bit of hot glue to, of course, create our cross. And in the meantime, while that paint is drying before I hot glue it together, I am using these tumbling tower blocks to create an awning that's going to be going over our church door. I didn't do anything to the blocks quite yet because first I'm going to be painting the church door, and I just kind of wanted to tell how large I needed to make the door. So I'm taking a dark brown paint, which is going to be the outline of our door. And then in just a moment, I'm going back in with white paint to create the actual door, not the frame. I painted the two tumbling tower blocks in the same territorial beige color, so while those were drying before I add them above my church door, I went ahead and hot glued the cross together, and then put a little hot glue at the bottom and placed that at the top of our church. Then I moved back to the church door area, and I am hot gluing the tumbling tower blocks to the top area of the door. And then I could have gone in with some white paint to give the snowy effect, but I had some white felt on hand, so at first I had cut out two different shapes, and I'm just trying to create the most realistic snow that I can. I ended up going with a larger piece instead of two smaller ones, and that is what I hot glue on top of the tumbling tower blocks. I also took some white paint and added it to the cross at the top of our church to make it look like it had a bunch of snow on it. I took my remaining white felt fabric and added it to the other edges of the church, adding it all the way at the top and on that middle section as well. The finishing touch was adding a bit of color to my snowy church. I found these ornaments from the Dollar Tree. You got two of them in a pack, and I thought they were so cute. So first I took off the ornament section, and I didn't want to mess up the tree, so I just kind of twisted and pulled, and that came off. And then I added some hot glue on the back as well as the bottom base, and I placed two trees opposite the door. I staged this on my mantle and included two of the larger flocked snowy Christmas trees from the Dollar Tree.
Next up is one of my absolute favorites. I'm going to show you how to recreate this rustic snowman, and he is off on his sled, ready to play in the snow. I started off this DIY by staining the sled with some brown paint and water, and then left that to dry. Next up, we're going to dive into some socks from the Dollar Tree. I'm taking this white one, and I cut off the foot portion from the upper portion that would go on your ankle, and then I cut off the tube area on the sock.
Then that top band around the sock, kind of what makes it like a tube sock, you're going to cut off. We'll be using that in just a bit. And then I'm going to bunch the sock up at the top and secure it together with a clear elastic before flipping it inside out. Just like we did in our first DIY, I'm filling it with these glass marbles from the Dollar Tree so that it can stand on its own, and then filling it with some pillow filling before bunching it together and tying it off with another clear elastic. To make a more distinct area between the snowman's head and his body, I took a rubber band and wrapped it around twice. And now we're going to move on to making our snowman hat. This is when we're going to need that top two portion of the sock as well as the top portion of another sock. I chose this black one, and this is going to be our hat. So I'm bunching it together at the top, and you guessed it, taking another clear elastic to secure it in place. And then as the cuff on the hat, I'm going to be taking that tube sock portion and pulling that down, and that's going to create the brim of his little hat. And you could just leave the clear elastic as what's holding his hat together, but I wanted to make it a little bit more rustic and cute, so I wrapped some jute around the top and tied a bow. Next, I moved onto his scarf, and his scarf is actually just some scrap fabric that I had. Thought it was very cute and went with the snowman Christmas theme. So I just wrapped that a bunch of times around between his head and his body, and then I just tied it off and trimmed any of the excess. So for his face, I'm doing the exact same thing as I did on my previous stock snowman. I'm taking the push pins, I markered them with some black marker, and then I also used the earplug as a nose. But you will notice in the later clips, I decided I wasn't really feeling the face. It was very cute, but I wanted this to be a bit more timeless and rustic, so I did end up removing his face, but you can choose, you can leave it on, or you could go like me and also just have a blank face snowman. But I did add some little jingle bells that I painted brown onto his body, and then I used some floral pick as an arm, and as his hand, I stained one of my wood stars, and I'm using the same technique as the twigs though, hot gluing it on after I have snipped a little hole in the side of my snowman, and then hot gluing it and pinching the side closed over his arm. Next, it was time to decorate the sled, and I did this by taking 2 of the garland picks from the Dollar Tree and hot gluing those on top. I also hot glued a little pine cone to the side of the sled, and I took another twig and hot glued that to my other side of my snowman so that his arm was out, and then I could place the reins of the sled right on top of his arm so it really looked like he was driving the sled.
The next DIY is taking an old glass bottle and transforming it into this woodland craft.
So the first step for this DIY is we're going to take a bottle. This is actually a vinegar bottle, but I think a wine bottle or really anything that comes in a bottle is going to work too. And then I took some Waverly White chalk paint and I ended up doing 2 coats to really make this good and opaque. We're going to be covering a lot of the bottom in paper, but you really want to make sure that you cover the top well in the white paint. Alright, so now that our white paint on the bottle is dried, I'm going to be using this Crafter's Square vinyl paper. This is just a hint that even if you don't have a Cricut or a different cutting machine, you should still pick up the Dollar Tree vinyl paper because you can use it like I am without a cutting machine. I cut about an inch strip and then I am just placing it all around the bottom part of our jar, and this is the vinyl black glitter paper. And for the holidays, the Dollar Tree came out with black and white buffalo check and red and black buffalo check vinyl paper. So I am cutting, I believe it was 2 inches, and then I changed my mind because I thought it was too thick. So I ended up cutting it down to about an inch, basically just the 2 sections of squares, so I cut off the other 2 sections. And now that I have my paper, and it is actually going to be 3 sections, I know I just said 2, but now that I'm looking at it, I actually used 3. So 3 sections of that buffalo check and applying it just like I did before, basically as a sticker and just sticking it onto my bottle. And I'm going to be using that exact same buffalo check red and black vinyl paper, but this time on the upper part of my bottle, and here is where I just went with the 2. I knew it was somewhere. So up at the top, I'm just going to have 2 sections of that buffalo check, and I wrapped it around the top neck area of the bottle. The main focus of this bottle is going to be a deer silhouette. I cut this out using my Cricut, but you could use a sticker, a stencil, or just print something off online and then glue it down to the center of your bottle. And up at the top, to add some greenery and embellishments, I made a little pick out of a pine cone, berries, and some garlands. And then I also took a little bit extra berries and stuck that in there too. So you could be done with the DIY at this point. But I have these bottle lights. I got them off Amazon, and when I got them, they came out to about $1.25 a piece. I believe you got 10 or 11 in a set, but sometimes the price goes up. So if the price is too much, then don't buy them on Amazon. Wait till the price goes down. I'll link them below so you can check them out. And all that I'm doing is stringing the lights down into the bottle and then placing the cork, of course, in the top section of the bottle, where you will then just pull the tab, turn it on, and your reindeer bottle will start to glow.
The next DIY is a woodland birdhouse complete with our very own faux cardinal.
I'm starting off this DIY by taking my wood pieces from the Dollar Tree and painting them. I'm using the shade Territorial Beige by Apple Barrel. I'm using this wood arrow from the Dollar Tree, this wood cube kind of piece, and some tumbling tower blocks. Then to create the faux barnwood look, I am taking a stippling brush and some white paint and just messily creating some white dry brushing strokes. Once all of that paint has dried, it's time to start making this look a bit more like a birdhouse. So for the awning or the roof of a birdhouse, I am using the tumbling tower blocks and some hot glue to place that on the top section of our arrow. Now, this box from the Dollar Tree is purely going to be for holding up our birdhouse, so you could use a smaller base, maybe a couple tumbling tower blocks, whatever you want to hold up your birdhouse, or maybe if you know that you're going to be leaning this against a wall, then you wouldn't need that section at all. But now it's time to start embellishing. So first off, I had to make the hole for our birdhouse. So I'm using a couple different shades of paint, and then I went over it with a little bit of white paint. And to create the woodland effect, I am laying down some garland pieces from the Dollar Tree. Then I knotted twice a piece of burlap ribbon, and I'm just going to kind of messily place that over the garland. I kind of made a long X shape with the garland, but really it's up to you. You can make whatever shape or style that you want. I did have to trim some of these garland pieces because they were a little bit too long, and I wanted my birdhouse to be a little bit messy, but not too messy. It's truly a fine line between the both. For that bright pop of Christmas red, I added in a small cardinal and also a snowy pine cone. The last step was adding some snow onto my garland pieces. I did this with white paint and a paintbrush. This merry crate is the perfect way to bring some pops of green garland and candlelight into your home. In this DIY, I'm taking one of the plain wood crates from the Dollar Tree and painted it a dark brown color and then filled it with some floral foam. Yes, this is some old used floral foam that I've had throughout the years, but I wasn't using those projects anymore, so I repurposed the floral foam for this DIY. So you saw me just place down a candlestick. It's one of the emergency LED candlesticks from the Dollar Tree, and I had wrapped it in jute, and I am placing that in the center of this crate inside of this glass jar that I also got from the Dollar Tree. And the next part is completely up to you. I took some pine cones, red berries, and a bunch of these garland picks from the Dollar Tree, and I'm kind of just playing around with how I'm going to fill up my crate. It's really just a matter of preference. If you like more color, you can add in maybe some jingle bells or little Christmas ornament pieces. I kept it pretty neutral with the woodland theme, so just having things that pretty much occur in nature, so the holly berries and the pine cones. And at first I thought I added in too much garland, so you'll see me take it out, put it back, and kind of go back and forth with how full I want this crate to be. And once I had everything inside my crate, I did add one extra little pine cone that didn't have snow on it, so I did add some white paint to that. For the final step in this DIY, I had some jingle bell garland from the Dollar Tree, so I just wrapped this around the glass section in the center of our crate, and I also took one of the merry wood ornaments from the Dollar Tree and lightly stained it and placed it at the front of the crate. Next up is this cozy looking candle that uses an old mitten. This is a really quick and a really easy DIY, but I think it looks very high-end and like something you would find in Home Goods. So I am just taking this tall, super sparkly green candle and placing it inside of my mitten. This is one of those mittens that throughout the years I lost its mate, but I held on to because I thought I could use it for some sort of DIY. Then I scrunched down the mitten and it left some fuzzies on my candle, so that's why I got the lint roller and kind of fixed the candle. If your candle comes with a plastic on it, I would just leave it because it's not like we're going to light this candle anyway. It's just for decoration. And then super simple, I'm adding some garland that has a berry and a pine cone on it and just hot gluing that to the bottom left part of the candle. I had one of these icy twig pieces that I really liked too and thought kind of went with the sparkleness of the green candle, so I went ahead and hot glued that down onto the candle as well. And that's all that you need to do. It is so easy and requires very minimal effort, but I think the end result is so beautiful and looks great on the mantle. This faux book stack using a Dollar Tree crate will look perfect on a tiered tray or displayed on your mantle. For this DIY, I am taking the wood crate from the Dollar Tree and I painted it entirely in some white chalk paint. Now for each of the books, we're going to have a different scrapbooking paper. So for the middle one, I have this really beautiful Christmas plaid. And once I cut out the proper length, I then just started to rip and peel all along the edges all the way around so it looked like an old worn book. And to adhere this onto the wood crate, I just took a plain glue stick and glued it down that way instead of using hot glue. And I'm going to be repeating these steps 2 more times, but this time with this different kind of faux burlap scrapbooking paper. Again, cutting out the piece, and then once I have my desired length, I am just starting to rip all along the edges, not too much because I still want it to take up a good portion of, I believe it's a 1-inch slot in the wood crate. And then I am just going to be gluing that down, and I'm using the same burlap paper on the top and the bottom. To go on top of our faux book stack, I am going to take some scrapbooking paper and this wood Christmas tree ornament, and I just cut out some paper and then glued it down on top of it. And to make sure this can actually rest on top of our book stack, I also painted a small wood block. I will be adhering the tree to that in just a moment. I wanted my book stack to say something about Christmas. You can write on the faux book stack using a pen, a Sharpie. Some of these rub-on letters from the Dollar Tree. I ended up finding this Fresh from Christmas Trees saying on Cricut Design Space, so I did cut that out using my cutting machine, but you don't need it. You can just take a Sharpie or a pen and write on the book stack. Next, I took some jute and just placed it around the faux book stack and tied it into a bow. Now that the wood block has dried, I will be adding that to my Christmas tree, but first I did take a wood star and some brown stain and added that on top of the tree ornament. Then once I have the wood block down, I can have it freestanding on top of the book stack. So I hot glued that down at a slight angle, and then to add a little bit more color and some Christmas spirit, I took some sprigs of this garland from the Dollar Tree, and I thought 2 was a little bit too much, so I ended up just using 1 sprig and a small pick of berries and hot gluing that down on top of the book stack as a final touch.
These last few DIYs were made on my old computer, so I apologize for the audio quality, but the crafts are still really fun and I wanted to share them.
This project is going to be using 3 of the wooden tree cutout signs from the Dollar Tree. So for the first tree, I'm actually going to be using 2 and stacking them on top of one another. I took the scrapbooking paper that I liked, cut it out, and then Mod Podged it down. As always, I'm using an old gift card to smooth out all of the bubbles that may have formed between the Mod Podge and the scrapbooking paper. Also, my paper wasn't tall enough to cover the entire tree, but don't worry, since I'm going to be stacking 2 trees on top of one another, it's not a big deal that there was that extra space at the top. Now I am covering my second tree in that same scrapbooking paper. And if I had any tip, it would be to use a plain paper because getting this plaid to match up was kind of a nightmare. But luckily, after 2 failed attempts, I did get it to match up, and I went ahead and lined up the plaid and then hot glued it down. I painted the back of the trees in this dark brown color just in case you were to see it from behind. Then I took 2 wooden stars, and I don't have any paint like stain, so an easy trick is you just take some paint and then dilute it in water, and that will create a stain for you. So I covered both of these stars in a brown stain. To give my trees some height, I needed a wooden dowel. This one was actually a s'more stick that I got, which worked really well. It was thick and it held up the trees without bending or sloping down. So I went ahead and covered this in the same brown color I painted the back of the trees. There was an obvious overlap mark where I hot glued the 2 trees together, so to hide this, I just placed a piece of garland over it. I began further embellishing my tree with the wooden star, and then I started to add bows and some holly berries around the garland. I did this by securing the wood dowel down with some hot glue. I used an old vegetable can as the base for my trees. Then I filled it with floral foam, which the wood dowel of the trees will be stuck into, and filled it with a bunch of rocks I found outside so that it would be weighted down and secure. I took some burlap fabric and wrapped that around the vegetable can and tied it off with a piece of jute. These wood trees look great together, but can also be used on their own. It looks great during the day, but I prefer it at night. First step in this DIY can get a little bit messy, so that's why I have the paper plate down. What I'm doing is taking my foam brush and brushing on some Mod Podge, then I'm sprinkling glitter all over. I did this completely around the candle holder, and I actually did it twice because I wanted a more opaque glitter look, and I let it set overnight. To add another rustic element, I hot glued jute all around the upper part of the candle. To add in some color and a floral element, I hot glued down some pine and holly berries to the front of the candle. Next, I took 2 tiny silver bells and hot glued them onto some jute. I also made a jute bow and hot glued both of those onto the front of the candle as well. To add a snowy feel, I took some white paint and painted it over the pine and the holly berries. And that completes the glistening snow candle. This magical lantern crate is my favorite in the entire Rustic Holiday collection. I started off this DIY by painting the push pins a dark brown. Then I took some burlap fabric and cut out a small piece. I wanted this burlap to say believe, but I don't have the greatest handwriting or a Cricut. So I took some of these letter stickers and just put believe onto the burlap. Next up, I took that same brown paint and painted all over the burlap as well as the letter stickers. When I peeled them off, the believe was left. I painted the wood crate that same dark brown and then used the push pins to adhere the burlap believe onto the wood crate. Then it was time to start adding some embellishments to the wood crate. I first put in floral foam, then added lots of garland, some pine cones, cranberries, and put the lantern in itself. For the final touch, I added a bow at an angle to the side of the wood crate. I think this lantern crate is perfect to leave up all holiday long, even into the early winter. Here it is at night, glistening along with that snow candle. Another illuminating DIY is this rustic vintage candle. I'm starting off by taking this craft paper and wrapping it around my white candle. I secured it in place with a piece of tape, but you could use glue if you prefer. Next up, I took this scrapbooking paper and this really pretty musical print and I wrapped it around the candle as well. Then I marked off where I needed to cut. I'm cutting my scrapbooking paper 1 inch shorter than the craft paper. That way, when I roll it back up, you can still see the craft paper peeking through the top and the bottom. To embellish the candle, I'm adding a little bit of raffia and tying it around the candle. Then I added in some holly berries and a sprig of pine. To add that winter feel, I'm taking some white paint and painting it over the holly berries, the pine, the craft paper, and a bit of that scrapbooking paper as well. That's your completed rustic vintage candle.
Next up is an ornament sign you can hang on your front door or keep indoors.
The first step in this DIY is to take off this metal ornament topper, and we're just going to place it to the side because we will be using it again at the end. Now I'm going to be making a faux galvanized finish to the middle part of my ornament. So first I'm painting it solid gray, then I'm going in with a sponge and sponging it with some black paint. Then you want to go in with some gray paint and keep dabbing until the paints merge and you get the look you want to achieve. I'm going to be covering the top and bottom of my ornament with the black and white scrapbooking paper. So I'm placing the ornament face down and just tracing it out onto the scrapbooking paper before I cut. Now I'm applying some Mod Podge onto the sign and putting down that scrapbooking paper and smoothing out any air bubbles with an old gift card. I'm re-gluing down the silver ornament topper that we had removed before, and now because I want there to be a clear border between the scrapbooking paper and the faux galvanized paint, I just took some black paint and a paintbrush and made a solid border line in between the two. This Believe sign came in a set of 3 at the Dollar Tree, so you could use any in that set or another sign that you might have on hand. To embellish the sign, I made a double bow out of burlap and buffalo check ribbon. Then I hot glued it to the top of the ornament. To add some color and foliage to my sign, I added some boxwood sprigs as well as some holly berries.
The last DIY in today's video is another sign. We're going to be taking a Halloween sign and transforming it into a Christmas one using a lost mitten.
I started off with this Halloween sign from the Dollar Tree because that's what I had on hand, but you can use any of the current signs the Dollar Tree has or even what's left in your craft collection. The sign was covered in black glitter, so I sanded it off so that the sign would have a nice smooth finish to paint on. Next it was time to paint my sign. I used a dark brown color so that the bright orange would be fully covered, and I did have to go in with quite a few coats of paint on this because the color was so bright. I added white paint along the border of the sign to give the illusion of distressed wood and so that the DIY would have more of a rustic look. I also liked that the white paint kind of looked like snow from far away, so I thought it went with the mitten decor. This was from a pair of mittens I had last year, but I sadly lost one of them. But I'm glad that I saved the other one because now I can use it in this DIY. I'm going to fill the mitten with floral picks, but I'm first taking a floral foam block and stuffing that into the mitten so that the picks have something to hold them in place. I did rearrange the floral foam block so that a small part of it was peeking out of the cuff. Now it's time to start filling up our mitten with some floral picks. These garland pieces are actually from a garland pick set, and I just cut them into smaller pieces. And all of the other floral picks I'm using are also from the Dollar Tree. To add some texture into the arrangement, I added a large pine cone and some pieces of iced willow. Lastly, I added a cluster of holly berries to give some color. I folded the cuff of my mitten so it fit on my board better and pushed down the floral foam. Then I took some jute and wrapped it around twice the cuff of the mitten, and then I tied it with a knot. I thought my wood sign was looking a little plain, so to add some excitement to it, I took a snowflake stencil I got at the Crafter's Square section of the Dollar Tree and gently dabbed white paint onto the stencil. When stenciling, less is really more. You don't want to grab too much paint on your paintbrush because if you do, it will bleed underneath the stencil. Now we're going to make the tag that's going to hang off of our mitten. So one of my favorite ways to use cardboard is to take off the backing so that it has this corrugated finish. You can see that I'm using my nail to kind of cut through because my cardboard had a little bit more glue on it. Next, I'm taking these printable holiday tags. I will link them in the description box below if you wanted to use them as well. And I really like this Joy to the World one, so I just cut that out and then I placed it on top of that corrugated cardboard, and I'm just cutting around, leaving a tiny bit of the cardboard peeking through all the way around the tag. To give the tag that rustic feel as well, I am painting on some white paint with a dry brushing technique. I'm just going all around the cardboard and the sign itself. Then I took a hole punch and punched a hole through it. To attach the mitten to the sign, I used a command hook. I hooked the jute onto it, then positioned it on the board where I liked before pressing down firmly and adhering the command hook to the sign. The sign originally had a jute hanger, so I'm taking a new piece of jute this time and making it a little bit longer. And that is everything you need to do to create your own rustic Christmas sign. Thanks for watching. If you want to see more videos like this one, make sure to hit the subscribe button down below. Until next time, keep searching, keep creating.